Well, let's talk about Kazatomprom, because there's some statements which were, I think, you used very carefully crafted. Every word is important, and I've got 9 here for you to go through. I think it's worth doing that. So Kazat, they said, we will not make up the tonnage after COVID-19. What are the implications of that, and why would they not do that?
Yeah, so for the listeners, these comments have come from an interview that Mr. Permatov, the CEO of Kazatomprom, gave to UXC. And what's great for everyone out there is Kazatomprom have put it on their website. So it's in the public domain. It's not just UXC subscribers who've got access to this information. It's well worth a read 2 or 3 times, because I think it does make a few very important statements. So yes, they've confirmed in the interview, and they reiterated this point in their results that came out a couple of days ago, that they will not seek to make up the lost production. And in their results, they also said that 2021 production will remain at 20% below their targeted production, which is the production that they commit to under their subsoil use contracts, which is the Kazakh equivalent of a mining license. So it's important for 2 reasons. One is there was some thoughts amongst either hopeful people on the buy side of uranium or the more bearish commentators in this sector that, so what, they go down a little bit, they'll just bring all of that production straight back, and by the end of the year, it'll all be filled in and it'll be back to normal. Well, they've absolutely made it clear that they won't be doing that. Now, what lies below that decision, I find particularly interesting. On the one hand, it's going to be tough for them at the best of times to get production back in. And they've got 22,000 people that they're going to need to get back to work and get back to their wellhead developments, plus contractors and so on. It's no mean logistics feat working across a big country, diverse sites. It's just a difficult thing at the best of times to get, once they're able to get all of these mines back to production. And we'll probably talk in a moment about it, but there's a lag associated with in situ recovery mining. It's not like an open pit mine, where as soon as you start putting material through the processing plant, X days later, you've got it coming out the other end as product. There's quite a cycle involved in situ recovery. But the other thing, apart from just the logistics and the difficulty of doing it, is I don't think they would want to put those pounds back into the market. They've been committed to a market-centric approach, and they've had to beat that drum for a few years because there was a lot of well-founded scepticism, I think you could say, about their market-centric approach as they started to tell the world that that's what they were on about. Then they listed. Then they started making commitments to the London Stock Exchange, which they've by and large kept. And they've stayed out of the spot market. Again, much to the scepticism of many people here. So they have shown discipline on the sales side. They have shown a market-centric approach. And they haven't to date been able to reduce their production by any more than the 20% reduction. And that's just a feature of the subsoil use contract regime in Kazakhstan. They're allowed to go within a corridor, either 20% above or 20% below what they say for each of those assets they're going to produce over the life of mine. The moment they go outside of that corridor, they've effectively got to renegotiate those subsoil use contracts with the government. And, it's still quite a bureaucratic environment, and nobody, even if you are 85% owned by the sovereign wealth fund of the country, you still just don't want to go down that path. And in the impression that I certainly have got over the last year or so talking to executives at Kazatomprom is that they've gone to the minimum production that they can without going outside that corridor, but they wish they could do more. And now that wish has been granted.
Okay. Well, let's talk about partners who need the pounds which are produced by Kazatomprom, because it affects their bottom line, affects their ability to deliver against contracts. And then let's talk about that sovereign wealth fund, because they are all in a very difficult place at the moment. So let's start with the Cameco's and Oranos of this world, please.
So Kazakh production is very important to Cameco, Orano, and in particular Uranium 1. It's become more important to Cameco and Orano as they've lost two other flagship assets. First of all, MacArthur River, that Cameco put into care and maintenance almost 2 years ago, and Orano had a minority share in that asset as well, and a minority right to production. And now, of course, with Cigar Lake being put into indeterminate care and maintenance, again with Orano having a substantial minority share of production, Cameco has lost all of its primary production, and what remains is its minority share in the Inkai joint venture, which is a 40% production share. So as that production starts to deplete, Cameco will lose its last source of primary production. And we heard them talk about that last week on their call, and they've obviously got a strategy for that, which involves acquiring pounds in the market and from other sources. Orano, equally, they're tapering down their production in Niger. They expect to close Cominac next year, and it's already reduced production. So they were counting on the pounds that they were getting out of Kazakhstan. And Uranium 1 is these days almost entirely responsible to Kazakhstan for obtaining its pounds. So that puts them all in quite an awkward position. And it puts Kazatomprom in an advantaged position because they've got a portfolio of assets. Some of them they own outright. Most of them they've joint ventured, including to CGN at Summers Bay. But even though production will be reduced, they'll still be getting production from some level of production from all of those assets for at least the next few months. So the question becomes, they've adopted a market-centric view. They've demonstrated the first level of that market centricity, or whatever the word is. How market-centric do they become? How aggressive do they become with their competitors, partners? Are they in a position to pull any levers on their partners? And would they even contemplate doing that? And that's something that will unfold over time. And those effects will very much depend on how long these assets are down for. Will they be down for the 3 months that Kazatomprom estimates? Will they come out of lockdown a little bit earlier and they'll be able to retrieve some of that lost production? Or will it stay off for longer? And if it's that scenario where it stays off for longer that I think we'll really see some quite profound effects on the market.
And the last bit of that question was, you've got the Sovereign Wealth Fund there. Here's a different set of drivers and outside influences, which means that they probably have, for different reasons, they want to see pounds being produced.
Well, now that's interesting. So yes, you're absolutely right. They do have different drivers. So they're still the 85% shareholder in Kazatomprom. Kazatomprom's been declaring extraordinary dividends in terms of total profit distribution, and one can only assume that that is to meet the requirements of its major shareholder. And those requirements, when you look at the impact that the current oil chaos has had on the overall levels of income through Kazakhstan, and in particular their sovereign wealth fund, you would expect that that mouth has just become an awful lot hungrier to feed. But does that mean extra production? Now, ordinarily it would, but what's interesting is if you look at this decision that Kazatomprom has made, and you look at what it's done to the spot price, and you realise that their revenue is all according to spot, and you can see it from their results, very much tracks the spot price. Their profitability's gone up. They're going to lose, by their own estimates, about 20% of annual production. But yet, their margins probably doubled, perhaps even more, as a result of this. So this will be an interesting lesson in commercial reality and markets for their major shareholder, who might not have been confronted with a situation where they can lose production and yet have their overall levels of profitability go up quite substantially.
That's interesting, because I think for people who don't know, Kazakhstan is a huge oil and gas country, huge and is very dependent on it. And obviously, with what's going on at the moment, it's been quite disruptive. And I just wondered if you had any thoughts or insight as to the types of conversations that could be had with a company which is semi-public, well, partially public, I should say.